Yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the second day of the conference Effective Graphic Design, centering dialogues between visual culture, centering dialogues between the visual arts and graphic design. My name is Yin Yin Wong. I'm a graphic designer based in Rotterdam, and I am joined today by a panel of specialists on the topic of typography and type design, and their efforts in de-modernizing visual culture through it. The structure of today is I will introduce our guest shortly, after which they will give a short 5-minute presentation on their practice, and then we will have a conversation, after which I will open it up to the floor for a Q&A. And yes, so we start on this side. Kristyan Sarkis. Kristyan Sarkis is a type designer and lettering artist born in Beirut and based in Amsterdam. He holds a master in type and media from Royal Academy of Art, The Hague. He has co-founded TPTQ Arabic, a type foundry specialized in high-quality Arabic fonts. He also co-founded Arabic Type Design Beirut, the first international educational program dedicated to the subject, as well as Arabic lettering workshops, a traveling series of which 15, now 16, I think. 16 installments have taken place so far. He has taught at VCU Qatar, LAU Beirut, ASAV Marrakesh, and currently teaches at the Type and Media Master Program, KBK. Next to that, he has worked with clients such as Apple, MoMA, Mozilla, and the Louvre. Next, we have Amy Wu. Amy was born in China, grew up in Australia, and lives in the Netherlands as an artist, designer, and teacher. Her recent interest in practice circles around literal and metaphorical approaches of mending, design, and remittance as self-fulfilling prophecy, and how text and textile might be woven together to form embodied publishing. In 2018, she published a cookbook of invisible writing through onomatopoeia, which explores steganographic practices and acts of protection, survival, and resistance in the face of oppression and violence. She's currently teaching in the design department at the Sandberg Institute Amsterdam, and her installation, Dear Ursula, can currently be seen at the group show The Brain Mixologist at Telebatub in Rotterdam. Next, Lorraine Fuerter. Lorraine Fuerter is a graphic designer based in Brussels, specialized in hybrid publishing, graphic design research, and intersectional feminist projects. Lorraine has a master in typography, but considers herself more as a contributor to collective and open source projects. Lorraine is currently a PhD student in St. Lucas, Antwerp, where she continues a self-initiated research project entitled Speaking Volumes, Art, Activism, and Feminist Publishing. Next, we have Garine Gokceyan. She is an independent graphic designer based in Brussels and born in Beirut, working on multidisciplinary pedagogical and social projects using Armenian, English, French, and Arabic languages. She has a master's degree in visual communications and a teaching diploma in fine arts, both from ENSAV Le Cambre, Brussels. And she's currently a teacher of typography at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels. And she's the associate art director and coordinator at Hashamajan's Open Digital Archive. Hashamajan is a non-profit organization based in Berlin, dedicated to reconstruct and preserve the memory of Armenian life in the Ottoman Empire through research. Well, super impressive, all of you. And I will now give the floor to Kristyan to show some slides on this practice.
All right. Hello, everyone. So this will be the slightly longer version of what Yin Yin just said. So yeah, I'm a type designer, I do lettering, and I also teach. All of what I do, all the aspects of my practice are specifically dedicated to the Arabic letter forms, to the Arabic script. And to be a native of this script and to work with the script in all of the aspects means that you inherit this incredibly wealthy script heritage that has been developed for over 1,000 years by brilliant minds and went through the conquest, went from east to west, and was adopted by a very large territory. So all of this beauty means all of this also means that you also inherit what you see on the right here, which is the type, digital modern type. This is when I graduated from the university, this was what was available on the market. And to me, this represented a huge gap between all the wealth that we have and what modernity came to be in type. And so I think that everything I've done after that was, my work is really a reaction to this trend that tends to completely remove all the characteristics of and beauty of the Arabic script. So I do my type work through my type foundry and type studio Typotech Arabic. It's an Arabic sister foundry to Typotech, a foundry that is founded by Peter Bilak. Peter and I met. He was my teacher in type and media, and a few years later we started a foundry together. Our foundry is specialized in developing Arabic and biscriptual fonts of high quality, fonts that have this conceptual dimension, fonts that investigate either an aspect or a characteristic of the script, or of the Arabic script, or are inspired by our modern and contemporary need for fonts. What you see here is the first font I ever worked on in my thesis project, actually, which is on top. Thuraya is the, to my knowledge, it was the first font at that time that brings back this very important feature in the Arabic script, which is the slant. So the letters go down, actually, as you type in, instead of going horizontal. And the second project, which is one of the first projects I worked on with Peter, which was investigating the effect of extreme width to the Arabic letters. To my knowledge, this was also the largest and first type system of the sort at the time. This was a few years ago. I will just focus on two quick projects from our library, which I think exemplifies our philosophy and my philosophy specifically. So just all the beautiful stuff that I showed you before about the Arabic script, or the beautiful calligraphic styles, can be really categorized in two main categories, the solid and the fluid. And I'll show you one project that is Kandus, which deals with the solid styles. The Kandus project is a type system that is supposed to map the development of the solid Arabic letter forms throughout history, but also throughout geography, because they changed a lot with time. And this is, at the moment, what exists. It's a very expressive kind of typefaces that basically steals the show whenever it's used. So, but this is only the central axe of what I just showed you here. There's a lot more that it's still a work in progress. Second project is for the fluid styles. It's a project that investigates the different methods of hierarchy, creating hierarchy on a paper or on a page in a manuscript and also in print. So there are different techniques, different ways. And if you see on the right side is what happens in print, on the left side is what happens in the manuscripts. Instead of creating different cuts of the same shape in calligraphy, they created new styles completely for headline and text. So this project is about this. Also, only one small part of this project has been released, but it's an ongoing project. That concludes quickly the type part. In terms of lettering, what intrigues me the most about making lettering pieces is constructing these puzzles, these intricate puzzles, and that's why what I'm excited most when I'm creating a lettering piece. But even in lettering, I always tend to look back at the script and learn from the past, from the heritage that we have. Like, for example, what you see here on the left, which is a recreation or a modern version of the calligraphic sheets that calligraphers used to exercise with. I always say that lettering for me is a meditative process that allows me to cope and to process everything that happens around, especially in the last couple of years. It's been intense for everyone. So that's why they're normally slow pieces and they're unplanned. So it's not like I plan all this ornamentation. I start somewhere and then I start building up the puzzle piece by piece. They could be about musings, like these ones are about life ideals and what is justice for humanity. Or it could be about very real topics like this one, which is a collaboration with a poet, a Belgian-Moroccan poet named Hind El-Jadid, about very real everyday topics like from right to left. It's about gender equality, abusive relationships, and global warming. And you can see also here that I tend to always explore as much as possible from different writing styles to use them to express exactly what I want to express. So learning basically how much I can, how flexible they are and how much I can manipulate them to end up with the desired results. Often my lettering work is also an emotional reaction to stuff, like this work that I've done for the Lebanese Revolution that started in October 2019 and is still ongoing. Or some things like, silly fun stuff related to COVID. This is, what you see, the colorful one is when I felt everyone was down and I wanted to, bring some joy, and I made this 9 ways of spelling the word happiness in Arabic. And last part, sorry, maybe I took more than 5 minutes, but quickly, yeah? Okay, so last part is the teaching. I teach lettering and I teach type design. Again, Arabic, and I teach lettering through a series of workshops, a traveling series of workshops that we call Arabic Lettering Workshop, that I co-founded with my friends Khajak Apelian and Wael Morkos. Basically we do it all around the world. Every time there's a different theme to follow, basically. And I teach Arabic type through Arabic type design, well, in Kaabeka as well, but through Arabic type design Beirut, an intensive type design program specifically dedicated to Arabic that I co-founded with my friend Lara Kaptan. And in both the workshops and this program, we follow a specific methodology, which is about dissecting the script, understanding the script, analyzing it, and then going crazy and trying to find new expressions of modernity. And this is what you see here is the result of the first year of the student, the work of the student that was really incredible and very, very rich for the scene. And if you don't remember anything I said, just you can go to Typotech Arabic, tptq-arabic.com. Under articles, you will find an article called Arabic Script to Type, a Manifesto, which is a manifesto I wrote with my friend Lara Kaptan to summarize how our approach to type and what we hope that would happen in the near future. Thank you. I think you press play.
Hello, everybody. I will just start with a video that explains a project that I wanted to share with you today in such a succinct manner that I thought I would just play it instead of me explaining, because it has visuals too.
Thunderclap is part shop, part sewing workshop, and part exhibition. The work employs steganography. It's essentially a work that camouflages into the streets of Beijing. If you're walking around, if you're standing in front of a bus stop or a train, people can literally pull out their phones. And her feminism was very much rooted in class struggle and capitalism. Steganography is a form of secret writing that is hidden in plain sight. And so the two elements that are visually pervasive in Beijing is Shanzai fashion and QR code. And so Shanzai fashion is a trend that is using nonsense English on clothing. And within the Chinese context, English is not meant to be read, but it functions as a decorative ornament. And so I've used this kind of visual rhetoric to camouflage within China. And also the QR code, because it provides this innocent cover to spread knowledge. The main role that I took for this work was to really amplify the work so that there are other non-Western feminist perspectives. And I think it's important not just for Hu Yanzhen, but other feminists coming from non-Western backgrounds. And it's the first work that really brought me closer to understanding my heritage.
wonderful that someone already made this 5-minute video. Super nice.
2 minutes, so I'll speak a little bit more about it. But I mean, should I? Okay. So that was my mother. Oh, how does this work? Okay. Oh, how do we go back? Oh, yeah. So yeah, I'll just say to kind of like unpack steganography and thunderclap a little bit more. What I was trying to do was experiment with this notion of subversive decoration, using English as a foreign language to hide in plain sight. And in 2017, the fashion trend in China was to use English, often black and white modernist typography on clothing, as a value signifier, shanzied from Western fashion labels such as Moschino, Vetements, and Supreme. And the aesthetics of Western culture was signified through the Latin-based alphabet and literally became the embodiment of high culture and coolness. And so what I wanted to do was to kind of take that and play with that idea as a decorative ornament, but instead of it being an ornament for English speakers, it was, I mean, you can read it as well, but ideally in the context of China, you're meant to only read the QR code and the letters, the characters underneath the QR code, which is simply download me or scan me. So the project kind of instrumentalizes this phenomenon as a walking billboard and to find alternative self-publishing platforms to spread the work of subversive feminist texts like He Yanzhen's. And I won't go too much in her work today since it's only 5 minutes. But I also experimented with this notion of steganographic publishing in the realm of laundry lines. And in China at the time when I was doing my residency, I lived in a residential area called Hutong, and there you see a lot of laundry hung on the streets. And I found laundry to be very fascinating, like clothing kind of acting as these migratory objects that transgress the boundaries of public and private. And the blanket is also like this nondescript, undetectable and unremarkable object, and for its ordinariness, I found it to be interesting to kind of design or impregnate is the strange word, but to place subversive the work of He Yanzhen on the medium of a platform. So, and I also like this metaphor of laundry being or launder being as a way to kind of wash illegitimate money, to wash away the questionable traces, and also the idea of airing out dirty laundering, which is analogous to disclosing secrets. So yeah, I liked this kind of metaphor of launder or laundry. So I kind of played with this. That's a little GIF I made, which inspired the next work, which is Hutong Whispers. I think this was made in 2018. So again, it's a steganographic catalogue of steganographic publishing projects camouflaged as a laundry line. And the work co-opts 3 omnipresent elements, again, like Thunderclap, so bed sheets, Shanzai fashion, and the QR code, and I explored them as covert media to publish, again, suppressed and sensitive knowledge. So, this work is meant to actually be eventually placed back into the streets of the residential alleyways of the Hutongs in Beijing, so that it can really return back to the natural habitat in which it was conceived. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to go back. And then I'll just end with, I end here. That's it.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I need to move the device. Thank you very much. So actually, I didn't. It's not really going to be a presentation of my work. I think I read too fast the email, but we were asked to prepare a 5-minute presentation. But at the same time, I think it corresponds maybe well to my work, and also I'm a very big fan of the people who are around the table, so I also feel like I should sit here and listen to you. But I prepared a little thing. And I wrote it down, which is something I hardly ever do because I find it super stressful. But anyway, I wrote it down because I felt a bit more comfortable having something, and not because when I start speaking, I can easily forget time. So I'll speak today as a graphic designer, and not as a philosopher, as a historian, or someone who did university. As a designer, my approach to words and concept is maybe, I hope, somehow humble. I manipulate words with my design tools. I choose sizes, colors, and fonts for them. And here, the font is that I chose to reuse the title of this panel is Cirrus Cumulus by type designer, my dear friend and type designer Clara Sambo, which is a font that contains non-binary glyphs, and it's connected to the collective Bye Binary, which I am also part of. So I'm part of many collectives, and that's maybe also why it's hard sometimes to say that this is my work, and here it definitely is not my work. I have to tell you that modernity and modernism is a concept that is a bit intimidating to me, but I'm also trying to not be afraid of big concepts and demystify them. So let's see what happens afterwards in the discussion. I'm going to try to speak like in these 5 minutes about what modernity or modernism does to me or around me in concrete terms, and also probably in broken terms with my approximate English, because as you can hear, I'm French speaking. And this might also actually influence how I understand terms like modern, which terms don't. It's very close. There is moderne in French, but sometimes they have slight differences. And at the same time, I'm also interested in misunderstanding. So let's see again. So I was born and raised in the French-speaking part of a country called Switzerland, which played an important role in the worldwide domination of modernist styles in graphic design, with its very hegemonious Swiss style, also known as international style. This style since has become a norm, as unfortunately many of you must know today, and still today often presented by design teachers as neutral. And this is very funny when you think about it. I mean, sometimes I'm even laughing when I write this kind of things because, you know, like Swiss style, international style, I mean, it's like so ridiculous. So in a way, but it's also very, very sad. And I like to use my Swiss privilege to criticize it, I hope, as harsh as I can. Why is it sad? Well, because this monopoly of modernist style coming from such a narrow and so tiny part of the world was performed at the expense of many other visual culture. Preparing this, I had to think about this book published by ECAL, this famous school of graphic design in my hometown, Lausanne, that I wasn't in that school, so it's also easier for me to criticize it. Its title is Swiss Typography in Cuba, set, of course, in Helvetica-like letters. Can you imagine doing a book about Swiss typography in Cuba? While there is so few documentation about Cuban graphic design and so much already about Swiss design. Another example that I thought about is 1972 exhibition in Dakar. And this is the poster, and the title of the exhibition is, in French, but here I'm going to translate, Switzerland Presents Switzerland. Or also again in this typical modernist design. How more colonial can that be? I mean, yeah. And this is from the past, so I said it's 1972, you can read it on the poster. But recently, in at least 2 graphic design programs, I saw this white Swiss man and designer, I assume, or maybe design historian, who was invited to present this project. And to my eyes, not in a critical and harsh critical perspective enough. So this still gets a lot of visibility today, and somehow I'm also performing it again to give visibility to that. So I'm very thankful that I'm also sitting with people who are showing more interesting things. Today, yeah, that's also something important. Today I'm in a panel in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and last weekend I was talking with a French graphic design festival organizer, and he was telling me how easy it is to get money from the Netherlands to invite Dutch designers abroad in festivals and so on. And then, I mean, it's not surprising that the Netherlands is so famous for its design. National graphic design, missionary style. I just had to say it because I'm also a co-organizer of a design festival, and we never ask money to the Netherlands to invite Dutch designers, but it's maybe something that I'm gonna think about because, and definitely, because then all the people you invite are always the people who come from places that have money to promote their culture. Though it's never that binary because there are so many amazing graphic designers who are here. So redistribution of money, we could maybe also talk about that. Okay, and another issue with the modernist hegemony is that its style is a synonym for contemporary, and here goes the moderne. At least in French, it's also still used like ça c'est très moderne, and not only contemporary but also good design. And this is also super important thing to rethink, like what is good and what is bad. And 2 weeks ago, designer Mohamed Gaber, who is actually based in Amsterdam and in the Sandberg Institute as part of the disarming design project and research group, let's say. Told me a story of how representatives of a huge typography venture were criticizing his Arabic font proposition for not being contemporary enough, too calligraphic, not sans serif enough. Because of just their ignorance of the script, its language, the language, and the whole visual culture and history. And this is very sad because, again, this thing of like contemporary modernism being contemporary is a really big issue. We could come back on this example because I think it was actually the end of the story was actually quite interesting. I think it's rather important to maybe then be even more precise than de-modernize. What we need is really like decolonize minds and practices, decanonize, and so many and somehow, yeah, I just wanted to say that of course, I'm not the one who comes with this idea, and I had to learn that with many amazing designers and design thinkers, such as Clara Balaguer, who's going to be there also speaking this afternoon. and whom I'm really a very, very big fan of. Jerome Harris, who you see, yeah, I mean, we could spend already an hour or just like check their works and their writings and so on if you don't know them. Or Ramon Terrada, to name only a few. And yeah, anyway. So maybe we're going to be able to talk around the table about what it means, because it's very clear, and Nina Paim just said it, like we need to stop talking about why, actually, because it's pretty clear, and there are many things existing and talking about why. But how is not always so easy. And I'm also a teacher, so throughout this little thing, I'm driving you throughout all my practices. And for instance, I think as a teacher, we have some responsibilities to tell stories in a different way. Maybe sometimes they need to be told by other people, so even our position as teachers, and when I say I mean, for instance, me as a white woman, is a question, and we just, for instance, we need to stop using the term neutral, like Helvetica is a neutral choice. Really, I really hope that if there are teachers in the room, you don't perform that, and that this stops, for instance, because we just need to act. And I'm going to finish by saying that I wrote as a small and personal act of resistance, which is ridiculous, but I'm learning this script and language that was present in my family, but lost through generations and with assimilation processes, which is the Armenian script, and Garine is a role model for me. And I'm actually, by doing that, so I was completely illiterate. I'm completely illiterate in other scripts than the Latin one. And I'm facing the difficulties that come with underrepresented non-Latin script, which is lack of resources, lack of technology support. So here you see my keyboard on which I had to draw the letters in Armenian to be able to do my homeworks. Etc. And but at the same time, it's been a process that has changed my life. So I recommend to everyone who only are able to read and write and design in one script to learn another script. And so with Garine, and she's going to talk really more in detail about all her amazing projects around Armenian. But basically, we gathered to gather typefaces and fonts in Armenian. For her, it's interesting, probably on the level of like typography, and for me, it was just basic. Sometimes I couldn't notice or like tell the different letters, and I needed to have more than one script or one font to be able to build this kind of visual vocabulary in my mind. So this is where we started this, and we didn't continue, but it's gonna continue, yeah, of course. And yeah, that's gonna be yeah. It's to say also that yeah, just really that it really changed my mind. And with Garine and other people like Naima Benayed and Lisa Huang and Emily Ora, we're having these discussions on multi-script design, and I'm very thankful for them to sharing that with me. And that's gonna be it. I'm gonna pass the mic and the pad.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah. Do you need a break or?
No.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you, Pilar, Yin Yin, and Sofia for having me here next to these brilliant designers, typographers, researchers. It's an honor to participate to this conference. So welcome to my world. My name is Garine Gokceyan, and I'm a freelance graphic designer based in Brussels with a growing interest in type design and more precisely Armenian type. I was born in Beirut and in an Armenian family. And in Beirut, I was used to living a multilingual life where it's totally normal to switch from from one language to another in a single conversation. So I grew up with 4 languages. English, Arabic, French, and Armenian. And each language had its own naturally designated role. English was for entertainment and visual culture. Arabic was for the groceries and paperwork. French was for mathematics and philosophy. And lastly, Armenian was for everyday use. Of course, this is a very personal and subjective way of describing these roles. It's only when I first wrote my professional email in Armenian letters that all these categorizations were called into question. That meant that I could talk about graphic design, typography in Armenian with Armenian words. For those who don't know, Armenia is situated in the southern Caucasus and was one of the 15 members of the former Soviet republics. Armenian speakers are divided into those in Armenia and those in the diaspora. The diaspora is very big, from Europe to the Middle East, the Americas, and so on. There are 2 branches of the language, Western Armenian and Eastern Armenian, a bit more different than when comparing Flemish to Dutch. The 2 branches of Armenian use the same alphabet of 36 letters, created in 405 by an Armenian monk. It's a unique alphabet only used for the Armenian language, and it's read from left to right. One thing that is very unique in the Armenian script is its punctuation system. Let me give you an example. Watch out, snake, where? So in Armenian script, you place the question or the emphasis on a word instead of putting it at the end of the word or the phrase. So now that you have a general idea about the Armenian script, let us go more into detail. What does it mean to talk about graphic design in Armenian? Is it similar to talking about Armenian graphic design? The answer to this question conceptualizes the main challenge. Armenian graphic design has existed based on the fact that there are publications dating from the 1512. Eastern Armenian was heavily influenced by the Soviet visuals, and Western Armenian was adapting itself to the visuals of the host countries, the diasporas. In both cases, the natural evolution stopped at a certain point, and due to the lack of the language's presence in the IT world, for example, the keyboards, the language stopped being as relevant. In the diaspora, it was replaced by the Latin script. Example, chatting started to be in Ladinadar. In Latin script, we wrote Armenian to each other. While working on Armenian projects, something became very clear. There are very few quality Armenian typefaces, and especially those who support the Armenian script. In addition, there's also lack of resources. No Armenian book on these topics has been published in the last decades. With a concrete example, I'd like to address the main challenges. In 2019, I was asked to design a multilingual poster for an Armenian language workshop, Zarmanazan, and the poster had to be in English, French, and Armenian. As Armenian designers, given the fact that there's no diversity in Armenian fonts, we usually end up designing our own letters. There's no time, also, no funds. So I had to base myself on the Latin font in order to create an Armenian display font, as you can see in the title of this poster. And when given the option of 2 different scripts on the same platform, for instance, a poster for a book, or for a poster or for a book, we usually tend to read the English. So we ask ourselves, is it the sovereign language that imposes itself on the reader, or is it the design that makes the Latin script more attractive? In this case, we have 3 different posters for each language script. Let's imagine that we had to put all 3 languages scripts in a single poster. How would the different scripts coexist? The size, the order, the color, the typeface, the position, everything would have a big impact on the matter, and thus every choice becomes a statement. Finally, in a world where contemporary typography design standards become the norm, how do we unlearn and reshape our way of thinking while working with underdeveloped scripts? And how can we invent contemporary Armenian visual culture when there's an imposing sovereign culture? Should we try to catch up, or should we create our own temporality? Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you all for this. This is wonderful. I'm also very happy to have you all at the table, and I'm also happy that we have time later to open up the floor, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions. And Thank you for ending with a question as well. Maybe we can just start off with that. Yeah. So should we catch up or should we invent our own? Or is it not that binary?
Am I gonna say?
Yeah,
Okay.
you are.
Well, that's a very, very difficult question. If I was thinking about a couple of things you also said when you were talking, like just simple terms like using the word non-Latin, for example, or encouraging everyone to learn another script. I mean, this might be an unpopular, controversial opinion, but honestly, I don't expect white people, in that sense, to teach me about my script, to do things that I want to do. It's not nice and lovely if some people took interest and really immersed themselves in a certain culture to really be able to design with another script or design another script. But I do not expect that. To me, this is my job. It's the job of people like me who are really interested because they grew up in this place, because they care about finding their own voice, because ultimately, I live here. I've been here for 12 years. I studied in a Dutch school. And in this Dutch school, I learned to get in contact with my own script. This is something I will forever be thankful for Type and Media for, because they taught me to really look at my own script and to appreciate all the characteristics of it. But now I feel it's my job to do this, and I don't expect anyone else to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I just want to say that indeed, I completely agree with you. I say more, and I'm not. That's why also I said in my bio that I'm not a type designer, and it's. I was just saying that because I think it's important also that the people who are always comfortable find themselves in the situation where actually they cannot even do that, because when you start learning a new language that comes with a new script, you realize directly actually that it's gonna take like years and years and years and years until you're at that level of beginner. So yeah, it's I completely agree with you that that is not the job of the people who, just what you said.
I'm saying this because I often get the question, what do you think of non-native speakers of the Arabic script designing Arabic typefaces? And my answer is always the same. I always, of course, encourage anyone can do what they want to do if they really care about this culture, if they immerse themselves properly and research and really go deep into the research, like I would say to any other native speaker of the Arabic script. So that's the same. But that also comes with the fact is we live in a Western-dominated world, and we live in a world where a lot of Western countries have a lot of more privileges than a lot of, let's say, Arab countries. And that will eventually, so that's why I'm always torn, that will eventually lead to a lot of people from the West designing Arabic typefaces that are not necessarily up to the level. So that's why I say this.
Can I add a point?
Of course. Everybody can just jump in whenever. I really want this to be an open conversation, so also feel free to ask each other questions when you feel like.
Great. So it's, for example, that's a question also who can really try to help us to create these Armenian scripts that are missing in the online or live world, let's say. And I think that's the main question, instead of catching up because there's no time in a sense of why not start now? It's not we're not gonna catch something. It's like start now and take the Latin as an ally instead of a dominant thing that is going to show us the way, but a research that we can compare, we can understand, or we can find keys inside that can show us the way for trying to work with other underdeveloped scripts. And I think it's very interesting to work also with people that do not know the script, to work with them, collaborating with them on new fonts, new underdeveloped scripts, because it opens our eye also on all the alternatives that can be done, and I think that's a great way to see this process or new way of doing things.
Yeah, and I also see it as it's a wonderful, like even if you were to acquaint yourself with a new script, maybe not in an endeavor to like to say like I learned this now, so now I can use to design this, but to it's like speaking more than one language. The moment you speak more than one language, you understand the structure of language differently, and you can look at the world differently. It's it's such an opportunity to look at the world in a broader sense, and it's not so much, I think, also in the subject matters that you touch on, and that's why I also am careful to say efforts to, for instance, demodernize, and I also thought decolonize was on the table to title this panel talk, but I find that a bit of a laden term that should be used carefully as well and responsibly, which I wouldn't want to just put on you. So efforts, demodernize, as modernism is a very strong ideology within the graphic design world that where all I think come from, or in our studies. But I think there's just also just a general lack of awareness. I think maybe for a lot of people in the room, hearing the extremely limited term non-Latin fonts, which is stupid. Of course, it's like saying non-English language, or like it's. But just to even open up the horizon, that there's more than that. That maybe we've never looked at our keyboard and thought, oh, like this excludes a tremendous amount of people and cultures and makes it impossible, for instance, the Armenian diaspora to, maintain, flourish, or build, progress in your own visual culture. I think there's a lot in between, like that.
I started calling every font that is not Arabic non-Arabic font. No, just but I mean it's just
it's good,
because I mean if we're trying to encourage people to go into another culture and we still call stuff non-Latin, it's we're always going back to the Latin as the center of everything, which
And the posters that you shown, like I generally can really enjoy like just the aesthetic form of typography in itself, whether it's Latin or non-Latin. But like I'm so eager to. I wish I could even read, still also understand it. Next to enjoying like the pure aesthetic, the aesthetic quality of it. And now I want to learn.
Well, thank you.
Maybe you already touched upon it, I think you all did in your own ways, but maybe you could talk a little bit like about how you metabolized like inspiration from your education or from your upbringing, or how it has emboldened or inspired you to get you to the practice you are at now. Because like I certainly like as a graphic designer was educated with like Swiss design, many things that I think we all know, like modernist design, like big icons. And how do you metabolize that into what you're doing now? Maybe not as a critique, maybe as a different kind of homage, or like as your, like you say, like finding your own voice in that. How did you do that, or could you say something about that?
Okay, well, because you're looking at me, I'll answer. So the problem with the, modernity or modernism, which are two different words, it's a bit like in French, two different words. In Arabic, it's twofold. First of all, I also studied Swiss graphic design. I studied graphic design originally, so I studied the Swiss style, the Swiss international style. Our program was very, very Western, so I remember when we got a project to deal with the Arabic script or use an Arabic typeface, everybody would freak out because we are not used to really using this in design. We thought that it's something that dated and we don't connect with it. And only later, I understood that, of course, we felt this way because there were no letters that actually express our voices that are, from this day of age, and the letters that actually know where they come from. Letters that don't just throw away all the history that we have in favor of this concept of Western modernity or modernism that comes, again, from the West. And I, of course, grew up in a previously colonized country. Most of the Arab world was previously colonized. So there are these residues of colonialism, in the sense of, at this point in time, in a lot of countries throughout the Arab world, modernity is strictly connected to the West. And that is why when we look at what is modern Arabic letters, the first reference are the Latin letters. That's one of the things that contributed majorly to the Arabic type looking how it did, what I showed when I first started. Because, this is what modern was. And that's what I told you. How do I do that? How do I metabolize that into my work? Everything I do after that is a reaction to this. And this is how it inspired me basically to do the opposite. And to show that there are alternatives. There are alternatives that represent us as young people from that region, with a voice that is not what you expect it to be, but with our own voice. So that's how.
Maybe I could specify the question a little bit for you, Amy, because when you were, I've heard you speak before about steganography and hiding the concept of hiding in plain sight. It also made me think of like this sort of age-old phrase that good typography is invisible, and of course, like this is also like. Embedded in this neutrality, and with good typography, we mean Swiss typography, like neutral, you don't see it, it's like air, and I wonder how, I find that kind of an interesting relationship because, I think you're approaching that from another perspective. Could you maybe say something about that?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. That is a knot that is will be interesting to untangle. First of all, the word text and textile are like the kind of root word of that in Latin is textere, which is textile. So, and in my mind, I always thought that text came before textile, but in fact, it's the other way around. So text comes after textile. So to weave words to create a kind of evenly balanced pattern, so in typography, when you're trying to minimize and make even all the different holes and etc., that gesture is coming from weaving, from creating textile. So in my research, I was thinking about that relationship a lot because to kind of, I suppose, loop back to the previous question about how do we metabolize the Western education that we've had in design school. I have kind of gravitated towards this kind of gesture of mending. Mending as, for me, a kind of cluster of various different practices that tries to, let's say, patch all the different forms of violences and historical, institutional, personal, and a part of that is also unlearning, let's say, institutionalized conditioning, so devaluing Eurocentric hierarchies, and thinking about how one can weave or one can mend these ruptured binaries together or address them in some kind of way, and yeah, so I don't know, that kind of comparison with text and textile really speaks to me. And in terms of invisibility, that's another kind of subject that has a lot of weight for me. I think I suppose a lot of what I've been trying to do in my steganography research, and steganography is the art of hiding in plain sight. It can be kind of, let's say, related to camouflage, but it's really specific to camouflage in communication. So it's very specific to, let's say, ways in which we speak to each other, how we communicate with each other. And it was a 5-year research, and during that research, I was really interested in, as you mentioned in my bio, evasion tactics, ways in which social movements co-opt these ways of hiding sensitive information as forms of protection or resistance. And as a methodology, there's always like this visible and invisible layer, what you show, what you choose to show, what you choose to reveal to only certain kind of groups of people that you want to communicate to. And after doing this long kind of steganography research that was quote unquote about political ideas, that was technologically driven, because I was also very much interested in how steganography, analog steganography, can somehow address high-tech surveillance and censorship. So it was like outside of me, but throughout this research, it started to kind of become clearer to me that I was also exploring an embodied state of steganography as an invisibilized minority living in a predominantly Western context. I grew up in Australia. I was born in China. I moved here 15 years ago. I've been studying in Western educational institutions, and I followed up by being a teacher. So I've been very much institutionalized, and a lot of my kind of metabolizing is the unlearning, and I'm doing that through the mending, and also realizing through the steganography research that I have been, like, my condition of living has been a steganographic state. So, yeah.
Beautiful. So it's almost like, I don't know, like with the example I gave about the typography, like one is like the sort of like, good typography is invisible, like it's almost applauded, but then there's also an invisibility that is imposed on you, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's also interesting because as a kind of Asian or Chinese diaspora, I think the stereotypical kind of image is that we're silent, invisible, and submissive, and that is equated with cultural assimilation and goodness, right? The ability to code switch. If you can code switch, you can take on the gestures, you can perform whiteness, so you can get paid, and you can, you know, get closer to access and resources and all these things, so you perform these things. So there is that kind of hiding in plain sight as well.
Thank you for that beautiful answer. Yeah, I think I will just go around the table a little bit because Lorraine, you also already touched up on it, right? Like specifically coming from Switzerland and from Lausanne, you have a lot to say about it, and you touched on, of course, you know, like the Swiss style, but you also wrote an article on the politics of inclusive typography, and I wonder, maybe you could say also, you know, sorry, I'm asking two questions at the same time now. I notice. Maybe I'll just let you speak first. Yes.
Yeah, maybe what I can add, because I'm playing a bit with this Swiss identity, but I just have to say also that it was actually we think that learning is a sort of natural thing, but actually it's not at all. And when I didn't know what was a graphic designer before I came to Belgium, so that's also something I like to say, because you expect as Swiss people that everybody knows about graphic design, but actually not at all. It's something I learned. I learned what was good design as well in the school, where people were telling me, no, I'm not even gonna say it. So, but because it's ridiculous. But yeah. So people were taking as model this country, looking at it from Belgium. So this was very weird. And then you have to unlearn that, while it was already a very unnatural process to learn what is good, that you cannot recognize necessarily, because I don't know, maybe if you have parents who are designers, but actually design and like so-called good design in Switzerland, it's not everywhere. I mean, it's yeah. So I think that's also maybe an important thing to put on the table, and that's why sometimes I'm just there like, we need to de-modernize, unlearn, But then we really, what does it mean? It means that we learn things so wrong somehow, or some of the things, because I don't want to throw away all the things maybe we learned. So yeah, I really see such a big responsibility in teaching, because we have to do all this labor and then so it's a bit ridiculous. And I just wanted to say that I feel I have so much to learn. Yeah, it's just that, and that's why I think I'm gonna keep on, learning this Armenian scripts. First, it was more a thing for like of my family and going back to those traces. But I guess I'm gonna continue. Maybe I hope with other scripts actually, because why not? If you have to learn about all these Swiss designers, then you could, and actually, yeah, I find it also super. Yeah, or I'm gonna say more interesting, but I guess it's the Orientalist,
It's a tricky.
Yeah, it's really complex, huh?
Yeah.
But then, okay, I think it's really important that we talk about it, and that's why I'm saying, like, I'm gonna say now, I think, and I'm forcing myself actually to look more in the other direction. So whenever I identify something that looks this modernist, I'm gonna be there, like, okay, no, I'm gonna try to look elsewhere, and this is also very unnatural or artificial, but at the same time, sometimes that's what I do, and I don't know. I think it's not right if we were in a ideal world, but it's a tactic, and I like also. I really loved your presentations, and I like this thing of, like, because for me, when you're talking about Amy, when you're talking about English as a camouflage and as a decoration. I think it's amazing, because it turns my head, because I'm so much into this Western culture, that when you say that, it flips my brain, and it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I always use the example of the Chinese tattoos in the West.
Yeah.
It operates in exactly the same way, and it's completely like gibberish, and it's also like word salads, and it makes there's misspellings everywhere, and they've like literally permanently marked their bodies with this nonsense Chinese. And I think the kind of currency here is that it's spiritual or it's exotic, and so it has this kind of Orientalist perspective.
I would add something. It's very interesting, because I started seeing this effect on me while, for example, I was posting stuff on Instagram. I was like, to whom I'm showing this? To Armenian speakers or to non-Armenian speakers? Am I trying to do an awareness that there's Armenian, guys, it's another script? Are they seeing it as a Armenian script or a decoration or forms? Or am I talking to Armenian speakers and trying to say, come on, let's collaborate, let's do stuff together in this sense? And I wanted to add something concerning the process of what happens when you go out from a school that is where you learn design in Latin. What happened with me, and I imagine with other Armenians maybe, is that they tell us, try to find your identity. And I'm like, what's my identity? It's like, it's related to history, and history, genocide. And it's too heavy. So every Armenian, and when you want to talk about Armenians, you start from the genocide. And it's so heavy. So I think before unlearning and understanding how you need to be very awake about what you're doing, is it going on the trend and trying to compare yourself with the Latin world, let's say, or before that unlearning, I had another step of taking off this pressure of my ancestors and taking off this pressure of the sacred letters that survived, which is very important to keep in mind. But today we're in a situation where if you want to let it survive, you need to revive it by doing and creating instead of just criticizing and doing what not to do, what isn't right to do, and etc. So yeah.
And for both of you, I also wonder, like, so you said, you know, you really found your voice during your studies, and but did you have a teacher that could like technically support you in, like, for instance, the forming of your glyphs? By the way, I should have said this at the beginning for the non-designers in the room, maybe, but maybe you've just all caught on. Like, we make a distinction between type design and typography, and typography, like Amy so beautifully said, like the weaving of text, you know, but the visual aspect of that, we consider typography like how you treat text visually. And type design, the making of the character sets, the glyphs that constitute a font. Apologies. Sorry. And did you have any technical? Could you rely on someone technically?
Well, in terms of teachers who have impacted the way I think and the way I work, I will start before coming here by my forever idol, who was Yara Khouri, who I always attribute a lot of what I did to her, because she was the one who made me realize that Arabic is actually my script, and it's the script that needs my attention. And then, of course, here, when I came here to Type Media, of course, all the teachers offered their support. And of course, even though most of them could not read Arabic or didn't have experience with Arabic, they were able to offer me advice about the discipline of type design and the discipline of connecting type to writing, because type is not just born out of nowhere, it's born out of writing, and it's essential that we connect it there so that we can eventually move on to another form of modernity as the one that we know now as the modern style. So yeah, I would say that. I wanted to say also something about what you said. Of course, it's very tricky being a white woman and, you know, are being interested in other scripts and so on. But I think what matters is the intention, and your intention is clear that it's a genuine interest because of your familial connections, but also because you have this interest to, you know, decolonize the world.
Wow.
I mean, you know, a lot of people have this interest nowadays, and that's great because there needs to be some resistance. Whereas I mean, somebody else's intention could be, okay, now everybody's doing Arabic typefaces, let's jump on the wagon wheel, and, you know. So I think the intention is what makes all the difference in this case. Yeah, otherwise it's quite tricky.
Concerning Armenian script, in my study years, let's say, I didn't really do any work on the Armenians because I was working on talking about the Armenian cause and doing a video, okay. But it's more on when I started now working with Armenians on Armenian projects that this question really was the main question of where is this typography rulebook on Armenian script? Where should I start? So I asked many friends, Khajak Apelian, or also trying also to connect with Armenia, with designers in Armenia, type designers, but they weren't really helpful. They just sent me a website where there's the fonts that I should buy. So it's an ongoing process of finding these keys. And Khajak told me something that I designed stuff, I tried to put it in text, and I sent it to people to read, and that was the way I did it. And that's the right way of doing it, while collaborating and creating a script at is it non-Latin, Latin, everything. It's reading, trying to read, and trying to check it with people who read the script. So I did a workshop with Sébastien Sanfilippo, and he didn't read Armenian, but it was more on, for example, the forms, the uniformity of the letters. But other than that, there's all the spacing problems, the diacritics that you put on the letters. These are real questions that I was trying to find with the experience, with the projects, to find the answers. For example, a simple example that the diacritic, should I say diacritic? The punctuation, the Armenian punctuation, does it have its own space, or does it go on the letter? And we were like, I don't know, I don't know, I'm gonna ask, no. I asked, and they said that was a technical problem, that Unicode didn't exist in Armenian, that's why it had its space. And then Armenians were used to seeing that space because in the newspapers they read it with the space. So when seeing the right technology, right way of doing it, they were like, this is wrong. So it's like unlearning within the Armenian speakers also, that let us try new stuff and just read. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, it's very similar to what's happening in the Arabic script. Of course, Arabic is slightly in a better state, I would say now, because of the amount of speakers and because, there's more interest because of this, because more than just the Arabic language use it. But the lack of resources, the lack of books or anything that talks about Arabic typography or Arabic type design, how do you handle drawing letters and how do you handle the whole system, how can you translate it into type? So this is like almost non-existing. There's more and more things that are happening recently, but did not exist like a couple of decades ago or even a decade ago. So similarly to Garine, at some point you realize that you have to do these things. If they're not there, you have to do them. So I'm lucky enough to have several friends who are like my closest friends, but also my biggest competitors in terms of Arabic type designers. But if you ask me who are your teachers in that sense, I mean, I believe that they are my teachers because we've been for years just talking about everything, sharing what we know, sharing our knowledge, but also asking each other for feedback. Hey, what do you think of this? Does this work? Does this not work? Because we don't know if it, I mean, we don't actually have an answer that is written somewhere or a consensus, which is in a lot of ways quite freeing because, you know, we are establishing those rules now.
Yes, I think that's very exciting that you're all on the precipice of making the tools from which your students, all of your teachers, can then again use and work further on. So it's kind of nice we're talking about who were your teachers and now you are all the teachers actually. You are those teachers.
Absolutely. It's very nice. As I said, it's very freeing. It could feel lonely at some point. You feel like you're really just like battling the darkness. But otherwise, eventually you get used to it and now we have like, okay, you do this. You write a book about the rules of typography. You do, you know. So we're trying to do that.
But it's a funny thing, right? Because you say like, it can feel lonely because it's like you're battling in the darkness and your friends are your teachers, but they're also your competitors because when there's such a dearth, then anyone doing the same thing immediately becomes a competition while also you're otherwise you're alone. You know, it's like such a weird.
It is true though. Like one of my closest friends, who is Khajak Apelian, is my biggest competitor because our work, our philosophy is very similar. So
I'm going to open up to the floor. I'm guessing there are a lot of questions. I would think, because I think there's so much to talk about. So, and I also see a lot of students, and I can imagine they would like to know something. Hey, Sadie. Yes. We are bringing you a mic. Yes.
So I'm still kind of formulating this question. So I'm a student in graphic design, and I'm also of the African and the Asian diaspora. So as I guess my institutional experience is also kind of unlearning a lot that I'm learning at the same time. It's been touched upon already a bit, but I think my biggest struggle is that even though I'm doing these projects, I'm still presenting them to a predominantly white audience. So kind of, do you still experience that? Or how do you still experience that? And how hopefully your practices have evolved now that you have this community that can like consume your work in a better way. So kind of that's idea. Do you still struggle with this a lot?
Yeah.
As well?
Can I say a little? I think it's like it's an ongoing. It's not a battle. It's just like talking about it is already doing something, or using your culture and putting it in your work is already another step that gets you near the, I don't know, so-called point where you want to arrive in your lifetime. But I think it's okay, and it's interesting to find people that are also interested in what you're interested in, what are your questions, and try to collaborate with them, and then to produce work, and then to present it to people who don't know this culture again, or the script, or these works. I think it's a kind of ongoing process of doing an awareness instead of just creating, or you just create and then do the awareness by itself. I don't know if I answered to the question. I said stuff.
Yeah. I think you did. I don't necessarily face what you're talking about specifically with white people, because I face it with anyone who perceives modernity in Arabic in a specific way, and that they could be Arabs, they could be non-Arabs, they could be white, so doesn't really matter. It matters their perspective on the topic. There's a lot of people in Europe, especially because I give talks or workshops, that are fascinated by the connections I make to the script, so that's not necessarily a fixed position. But there are, of course, the others. It generally has to do more with the commercial world versus the academic world or the artistic world. The commercial world often does not care so much. And it is the case, but more and more, I think, more designers in branding agencies or graphic designers are becoming more aware of how to use type, or what is really contemporary Arabic type, and that is getting better. But the struggle is still with whites or non-whites, anyone who perceives modernity in Arabic as Latinized, basically. So that's my struggle, and it's a big one.
Hi. I think I recognize you.
Yeah, you were my tutor last year.
Yeah, it was digital.
Yeah,
yes.
It was also just 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
When you asked your question, I had to think about this book that Yin Yin and I have been talking about for a while, called Minor Feelings. Kathy Park Hong, she's an American Korean poet and novelist, and I love the book, but there was a chapter in there that I had to think about in relation to your question, and it's the question of audience. And as a poet, she has like this mental breakdown. She has a depression, and she's like questioning her identity and the world of poetry and institutions of power. And I think she really struggles with this question. And so when she goes to poet school, or like creative writing school, poet school, she struggles to write about her own identity, yes or no. And I think in her early years, she tried to remove any kind of trace of her identity in it, because it was quote unquote seen as ethnic or navel gazing or etc. It was shunned. And this is you could say, like the continual perpetuation of erasure of these minority experiences. And so for a long time she removed any kind of trace of her identity, and she felt, I suppose, numbed and depressed, and like Minor Feelings as a novel is like kind of documenting that process. And she writes like, okay, so if I do write about my experiences as a Korean American person, author, poet, am I writing it to white people to validate my experience, or am I writing it to find community? It's tricky. It's not an easy and simple question, but I think it's an ongoing struggle, one that I also very much struggle with myself when I'm working on exhibitions. My question is also like, who am I making this for? Am I making this for, like, am I turning my suffering as a consumable product, or am I trying to seek people who are similar, like-minded, who I can have community with? And yeah.
If I can add a little bit to that, I also recognize that, and that's also questions that I have, and I do consider it a struggle. But some days I consider it a struggle, and some days and I have to say nowadays that's most days, I consider it as a wealth of opportunity, and I feel very excited to be at a point where I am allowed to untangle this, but not everybody's allowed, you know. So that's definitely something. And this question of who are you doing it for, and when are you being authentic in that, is, I think, something ongoing, even from a non-diasporic perspective, and fostering stability in that, or understanding who you are in those sort of rotations, is something that takes time. And of course you're also, you know, studying, so like within that study you're also struggling with what is my voice, you know, in general at all. So like I think it's something that you move through, and it is something continual, but it also is something that can bring a lot of it's also exciting, and sometimes it's just shit. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Someone else? I'm looking that direction.
If there's no one, I would like to ask one. But I wanted to see if we could put your slide where you show the two languages, the Russian or the Soviet influence versus the, because I think that this slide actually speaks to some of these subjects. So there's the Western and Eastern, the local and the diasporic. And so we have it here on the screen, and I think that this is what I wanted to touch upon a bit, and I think that you ask a question from a formation, and I wanted to speak to, not to raise a question, but to kind of ask in a kind of devil's advocate position, if this is not your experience, the one that as diasporic communities we are compelled to have by the Western institutions that we participate in. And by that I mean is that I'm much, much older than all of you. And when I studied in the 1990s, which was really the height of identity politics in the United States, I studied in a liberal arts college, of which 14 students, half of which were coming from abroad, and the other half were American. And we were asked to speak about our identities, and we're like, why? And all the international people had to speak about where we came from, a sense of belonging, something that dealt with and that had to recover our mother tongue, our heritage, meaning the school or professors. Within the concept of identity politics, of which Said and Orientalism was represented, it was us that had to do the work of presenting the culture where we're coming from to all the students, and there were no customers, you know, or audiences or whatever, to the students in the class. Whereas the other half of the class that had grown up in the United States could do things of whatever subject they wanted, whether it was love or resent or consumerism, or to think formally about the image, or you name it, see? Meaning it was academic and topical ideas, philosophical ideas that they were more easily able to deal with. Whereas the other half, that we were not from there and did not share the same art history nor canon, were constantly asked to be able to address our background. And so I feel that this image, to me, when I saw it, I feel that it's very much associated to the discussions around, it's not as well articulated and identified as you have. I hope that you were during my school year, or that we had more tools and knowledge to be able to make a a more conscientious critique. Because what happened is that in me and my generation, we were resistant to deal with that identity, see? And that had to do with the politics of the time of saying, no way, you will not make me an other, see? And that otherness was represented by things that had to do with our mother tongue, with our heritage and such. So we did not address the international style, neither, but we didn't want to go back to the regionalization that we were being asked and expected from the Western institution that we were in. However liberal it was in its thinking, liberal arts in its thinking. I feel very different now, and of course, when you speak, I understand, because for us, it had to be like a 20-year trajectory to be able to have positions of power, responsibility, whatever you want, to be able to make a choice, see? And make a choice with a very different set of reasoning or intentions behind it. But this image, what reminded me of was of a very important text that was published in the United States during this culture wars, which was called, in the 1990s. And it's a text by an artist called Luis Kaminster, who must be in his 80s now. And he's of German descent, Uruguayan, and he lived in exile for all his life in New York City. And as many people from the Americas, from the Southern Cone, specifically were the dictatorships. But he became, as many artists, a teacher, as many of you are, to sustain a practice that was conceptualist. And I mentioned him yesterday because he did global conceptualisms, an exhibition that really looked beyond the Western canon of our conceptualism. And what he said was there's something called Spanglish art. So it was about these two languages that are predominant in the United States, which is English and Spanish. And he said there's a huge difference between the diasporic visual culture that Latinos, Hispanics, Chicanos, that's how they're called, have in the United States versus the people from Mexico have there. And this image is very much people in mainland Mexico really which were much more influenced by the communist and prior to that the socialist avant-garde that had been imported through Russia and through the Russian avant-garde. So on the image of the USSR that you're looking here is very much what inspired design culture and visual culture in mainland Mexico. While on the right, when you see the diaspora, which is this, you would say like, but where is this Germanic, like, I don't know where this comes from. This is what inspired or what was taken by the diasporas in the United States. So even if you go back to Mexico, or if you're in the border, but in the Mexican side, the people that have considered themselves in the margins or marginals will use this diasporic design. And it is considered the thing. Now, if I would be arriving again to the 1990s to school, in a flashback, like a kind of Back to the Future situation with Michael J. Fox, like if I would be going back with the knowledge that you've presented here, see, the articulation of these two tendencies of the diasporic and the Sovietly influence, which influences the rest of the world. I mean, come on. As the United States, or capitalism, if we want to call it, has influenced design. So it's no longer the Swiss international style, it's capitalism, right? In terms of branding and so on, typography. So when I go back to the past, to my identity politics classrooms, again, I don't know if I would research and accept be other. See? I mean, I think that the position of a resistant of saying, no, I'm not going to deal with Mexican artists just because I'm Mexican, or with Mexican subject matter and the poverty or the genocide. And so I feel that a lot of the conversations that we have in cities like Rotterdam, which is super diverse, right? And in cities in Brussels, and or in countries that really have had a lot of immigration, which is ultimately in the north, because they fucked us in the global south, see? you know, we are having these subjects, but back in my hometown, there are no immigrants, see?
Yeah.
And design has evolved, and it has evolved not in either way. It's not in either or. And it's neither in the international style, so sometimes I feel not even in between, but in a limbo and alone in terms of saying there are so many different, as Nestor Garcia Canclini said, there's many different postmodernisms. So my question is really what you raised, to who are we speaking? And about the experience that you feel, you're gonna feel it all your life. I'm sorry to say, but that's true. When I arrived here and I put colors down there in the space now called Meli, they infantilized me by saying that it looked like a kindergarten. And you know what? I think I understand, see? You just have to de-escalate, so it's always gonna be the case, see? And it's just how do we create the tools not only for regionalizing or the intentions for de-modernizing, but also how do we create certain tools to be resistant with design or visual culture that can be read to the communities that we're coming from. Because again, you know, there's very few places that have such a large diasporas as here. Or as the United States in LA, where a lot of things happen, or New York, right? These hubs of creativity in which we are living one right now are privileged insofar there is so many different cultures. And we take advantage of that, but it's kind of speaking only to those urban centers that are super diverse and not to the larger communities elsewhere whose design is modulated through something really local that has nothing to do with immigration, and that's why political polarization, but also to something that is stronger, that is branding through capitalism. So I just wanted to put it out there because I do think that it's fabulous, and I understand, but in my age and time, recovering our roots would have been to subsume, to be subordinated to the Western demand of being other. So again, not international style, but certainly not a regional either. So I just wanted to mention that, and positively, eh? Also, it's not like drama. It's like, okay, this is how it's gonna be. How do we engage people to come with us closer in being more open, no? Of the, I mean, I don't want to be hippie here, but in being more open to coexist with a different image as we recover and present our heritage. Hence, the keynote speakers in this conference, that we focus on one figure and the transnational or local impact and influences that they had, so that we can understand this better. So we will take more notes from you so that we can commission more research of important figures in the language. So I just want to say, I'm very passionate, as you know, about this, so I just wanted to say this, respond to both of you and say how important this image is pedagogically speaking.
Thank you for that addition, Sophia. And if there are no further questions, I think we're wrapping up this panel. Thank you so much for coming. It was really a pleasure to speak to all of you. And thank you to Melly, of course, for hosting this. I hope we can continue the conversation throughout the day. There will be a coffee break now, and at 3:30, we'll be back in this space with a... Oh, 3:45, my apologies. At 3:45, we'll be back in this space for a keynote lecture on the work of iconic graphic designer Karl Martens by Prem Krishnamurti. So see you then again, and thanks.